India's GDP was 25 to 35% of the world for about 1700 years, one of the largest and wealthiest economies in the world. Attracted by India's enormous wealth, the British came to Surat, a coastal town in the west of India, for the first time on 24th August 1608. By the time they left on August 15, 1947, the Indian economy was only 2% of the world's GDP. After many decades of disappointing economic growth, India is on the rise again and is on its way to become the world's biggest economy once again. In this video, I analyze the reasons behind it. For thousands of years, economic progress was linear and linked to population growth. Without machines or technological innovations, one person could only produce so much with their bare hands. Britain was the first nation to industrialize and use machines and equipment to produce more stuff. As a result, its GDP increased from 2.9% of the world's GDP in 1700 to 9% in 1870. It's now India's turn to industrialize at a rapid pace and catch up with the West. For many decades since its independence in 1947, India loved socialism and suspected the ability of the free market mechanism to decide how to use the nation's capital and labor. But since 1991, when the then government of P.V. Narasimha Rao opened up the nation's economy to private competition, the Indian economy grew 11 times in size. After adjusting for cost of living, India is now world's third largest economy. It has over 6,000 ultra-high net worth individuals with assets of at least $30 million. With 166 billionaires, India has the third highest number of billionaires in the world. Two Indians, Mukesh Ambani and Gautam Adani, compete for the title of the richest Asian in the world. It is hard to predict accurately how big the Indian economy will get. But to understand India's potential, look at India's diaspora. India's economic trajectory depends on three things in the short term: government policy, oil prices, and the monsoons. In the long term, it depends on two factors: geography and demographics. However, to understand India's potential, look at how spectacularly successful Indians have been in other countries. There are about 32 million Indians overseas, including those people of Indian ancestry who are neither citizens nor long-term residents of the country they are in. They sent back $87 billion to India last year in foreign remittances. According to Data Monitor, in 2012, the total wealth of the Indian diaspora was $1 trillion, which is equivalent to half of India's GDP, though they make up only 2% of India's population. Indians abroad are at least as wealthy now as they are in 2012, if not a lot wealthier. Every American earns $63,500 per year, which is 32 times the average income of an Indian in 2022. But the average American of Indian origin earns $120,000 per year, almost twice the national average in America, according to the US Census Bureau. So in other words, Indians in America earn almost 62 times more than Indians in India. Not just that, Devesh Kapoor of Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore shows Indians make up 8% of world's top-tier artificial intelligence researchers. It took a few decades, but Indians now also lead global companies. Though the Indian diaspora makes up only 0.2% of the world's population, it makes up 2% of world's top business leaders. Deutsche Bank, Deloitte, Microsoft, Google, Adobe, IBM, Chanel, many other companies have bosses of Indian heritage. Indians are prolific in the startup scene as well. A recent Stanford University study found that 90 of the 1,078 founders of 500 American unicorns were born in India. Unicorns are privately held startups worth at least $1 billion. Kamala Harris in America and Rishi Sunak in Britain are the most visible politicians of Indian descent. But there are at least 30 people of partial Indian descent who have served as heads of state, including in countries as diverse as Singapore, Malaysia, Ireland, Guyana, and Suriname. The message is obvious: give Indians with initiative the right economic and cultural environment and they will thrive. India's diaspora does not just tell you what's the country's future potential is. It also has a huge role to play in realizing it. India is one of the few countries in the world that has such an accomplished and large Indian diaspora to draw upon, a huge competitive advantage. For instance, Indian tech professionals spread all over the world have played a significant role in raising India's productivity, especially in its services sector. The country's IT services sector, for instance, grew its exports from just $4 million in 1980 to about $230 billion in 2022. Second, the diaspora will continue to send back foreign remittances, which play a significant role in generating much needed foreign currency. According to McKinsey, a consulting company, India needs to add 90 million new jobs by 2030 to absorb all those who will enter the workforce during that time. The country will need a lot of capital to expand and create new jobs on such a large scale. India has a dynamic diaspora to rely upon for cheerleading foreign direct investment into the country. India lifted 271 million people out of poverty between 2006 and 2016, according to the United Nations multidimensional poverty measure. Only China lifted more people out of poverty in history. Though millions remain poor in India, policymakers now know what works and how to help. For many ordinary Indians, small increases in salary mean large changes in disposable income that could boost an array of industries in India, ranging from insurance to household appliances. The second important pillar of India's new growth pattern is the emergence of a single national market. This new single national market has three components: a national goods and sales tax or GST, infrastructure, and India Stack. Let's start with GST. A huge obstacle to trade between states has been removed by a 2016 nationwide goods and services tax. It was put in place to replace a confusing set of local taxes. Previously, because the rates differed between India's 29 states, making stuff in one state and selling it in another was very hard. It was often harder to trade within India than it was to trade with NAFTA or the European Union. Queues of lorries idled at India's state boundaries, much in the same way they did at international borders. All that changed with GST, which is an agreement among all states to charge the same indirect tax rates. Now businesses can distribute their products across the country from a single warehouse, rather than replicating supply chains in each state as they had to previously. GST has also made it easier for the government to collect taxes. Before GST, businesses in India had to pay taxes on the entire value of the products they bought and sold, a situation that often made it cheaper to import stuff than make it local. Because GST is a value-added tax, it encourages businesses to make stuff locally. In addition, it also brings vast chunks of previously informal businesses under the tax. That's because businesses have to document the prices at which they buy inputs and sell products unless they wish to pay higher taxes. This is fast replacing regional markets and informal businesses using cash. Such informal firms accounted for 2/5 of output and 87% of jobs only 5 years ago. Much of the reform and investment underpinning this change predates Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but he has expedited them. Let's look at the crucial infrastructure. India's famously bad infrastructure is starting to look strong. The national highway network is over 50% longer than it was in 2014. It also uses a digital tolling system to avoid queues. The number of domestic air passengers has doubled. Air freight volumes are up by 44%. There are over 3 times as many mobile phone base stations, supporting 783 million broadband subscribers. Wall Street private equity firms are competing to create networks of warehouses across India. Besides all this tarmac and concrete is the India Stack or Tech Stack. These are a set of state-sponsored digital services that link ordinary Indians. This includes Aadhaar, a biometric identity, a push to make sure everyone has a bank account, and a national payment system known as UPI. The rapid adoption of these platforms is forcing a vast, inefficient, and informal cash economy into the 21st century. As a result, more businesses are being dragged into the daylight, as I explained earlier, using modern banking and perhaps paying taxes for the first time. Competition in national marketplace has been bad news for smaller firms. These firms were reliant on tax dodging and captive markets. Bigger firms that have brand, scale, and technological shrewdness have grown. For example, Titan, the leading firm in the jewelry trade, boosted sales by a third and floor space by a fifth during the pandemic. A new bankruptcy code that makes it harder for zombie firms to stagger on is also speeding up consolidation and boosting productivity. India's top 600 firms are 11 times more productive than average, according to McKinsey. financing. Third pillar of India's new growth is manufacture. India has long dreamed of becoming a factory for the world, but manufacturing share of output has remained stuck at 17 to 18% over the past decade, as corporate investment by all firms has idled at about 9 to 12% of GDP. India accounts for a minuscule 1.9% of global exports of goods. India's top 20 firms earn 50% of corporate India's cash flows. They are making money fast enough to take risks with their earnings instead of having to borrow to excess. The ambitious giants include conglomerates such as the Adani Group, Reliance Industries, Tata, and more focused giants such as Jindal Steel. There have been some concerns about concentration of corporate power, but the ratio of these four firms' profits to India's GDP is 0.7%. Equivalent ratio for four tech giants, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, which are America's biggest companies, is 1.4% of their GDP. These four firms alone plan to invest more than $250 billion over the next 5 to 8 years in infrastructure and emerging industries. In doing so, they intend to develop local supply chains, which fits with government goals. For instance, Mukesh Ambani of Reliance Industries says he will cut the price of green hydrogen to $1 per kilogram by 2030. Currently, it's at about $5. The Tata Group is rolling out plans to manufacture batteries, electric vehicles, and semiconductors. These are huge, risky bets that few other firms would dare to take. The Indian government is doing its part too to promote manufacturing and capitalize on multinational efforts to diversify away from China. It is handing out $26 billion in subsidies over the next 5 years for investments in 14 industries. These production-linked incentives, or PLIs, pay out as firms' revenues expand in such fields as solar panels, batteries, and pharmaceuticals. Samsung from South Korea and Foxconn from Taiwan are using PLIs to make more mobile phones in India. Local companies such as Ola Electric, an affiliate of a big ride-hailing firm, are also taking advantage of. Ola has built a large e-scooter factory 90 kilometers from Bangalore with the goal of becoming a global force. The fourth pillar is founded on technology, a long-standing strength of India's. India's IT services and outsourcing industry has doubled in size over the past decade. Its annual revenues are now $230 billion. Though India is only a minuscule exporter of goods and ranks 16th in the world, India is the world's 5th biggest exporter of services. The fact that there is a global shortage of software industries and that software is increasingly supplied as a service from the cloud means the trend is likely to continue in India's favor. India's biggest difficulty now is finding talent. Some 5 million people already work in tech, and there is a red-hot market for new workers. If not from India, where else can Western firms find 500,000 new engineers a year who can communicate well in English? This combination of engineering skills, mobile data, and a national tech stack has created lots of startups. Not just in e-commerce, delivery, and ride-sharing services for the 10 to 20 million richest Indians. New startups like Urban Company, Class Plus, and Razorpay are targeting customers further down the economic pyramid. New generation of low-key firms such as Skyroot Aerospace, Arav Unmanned Systems, and Sun Mobility are operating in frontier technologies such as space, drones, and batteries. These firms use domestic research and development and are targeting exports for over half of their sales. India's rich venture capital system can finance firms throughout their life cycle, from angel funding to public offerings. A local venture capitalist reckons that a pipeline of 10,000 plausible startups are created each year in India. The highly accomplished diaspora, a national single market, industrial policy to promote manufacturing and technology are working in India's favor. They are likely to bring about a pickup in annual growth from 5.4% reported in the last quarter of 2021. India is the only big economy likely to grow at 5 to 7% per year for many years, if not decades to come. As a result, Indian economy is all set to overtake the American and the Chinese economy to become the world's largest once again, a position it held for 1600 of the past 2000 years. If you like this video, I recommend that you watch this one, where I analyze Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, known as India's Warren Buffett. He made $6 million, though he started with just $60. I'm Sharat Mantravadi. Thanks for watching.